Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. I think we'll get going now. Make sure you can see my screen there. All right, so the last webinar we did, we basically made this, we got to this point. So we're just going to continue on from there, and I'll show you some tricks and just try to generally show you the workflow of KeyShot. So looking at this, what I want to do is get the lens for this camera actually put in there. So that's gonna mean we need to worry about the scale of the lens in relation to the scale of this camera. So what I need to do is pull up my lens file. These are coming from SolidWorks. All right, let's take a look here. Camera. All right. So what I'm going to do is open up my assembly here so you can get an idea of what I need to do to make this work correctly. Okay, so in one assembly I have the body, and then I have two different lenses. You can see they're positioned correctly. So you can see which ones we have here. All right. So I needed to make this assembly, and then what I needed to do was save out individual assemblies from this one assembly of each of the individual components. Of course, I could import an entire assembly, even with with both of the lenses shown, import that whole thing into KeyShot, but then everything will be under my scene tree here as one model. So instead, we have it as separate files, and let's just go ahead and see if this file is set up correctly. All right, so I drag and drop one of my lenses. I'm going to add it to the scene, and to make sure it comes into the right position, I don't need center or snap. And then what I want to make sure is enabled is the coordinates from previous import. So just see if that works. And there we go. So now looking at our scene tree, you can see it's basically positioned exactly the way it was positioned in SolidWorks. The difference, of course, would be if I imported it and told it to use automatic coordinates. What it would do is scale this new file up or down some arbitrary amount so that it fits into a space within KeyShot that we have preset so that you're always kind of within the environment and your models come into a decent size, so they're easy to work with the cameras, and they're always right in the center. So you have to override that default behavior by making sure that, I'll show you the menu again there. Desktop, camera. When I drag and drop, I'll just bring lens 1 in as well. Drag and drop this one here. You see if this is set to automatic, it's basically just scaling by whatever makes it fit the right space. So from previous, it uses the same amount of arbitrary scale that was applied to the first model, and it applies it to the second model. You will see in a new session of KeyShot, if I drag and drop a model into here, I don't have those options. I just have center and snap. And that's because there is no previous model to scale off of, to use the same scale values from. So this, you are basically forced to use the automatic scale feature. So that automatic coordinates option is completely automatically on here for the first import. So But we have our lenses now. The nice thing about having imported these separately, and let's go ahead and get this other one in there. Importing these as separate models allows us to very quickly and easily hide and show one instead of the other, so I can switch between them. Alright, so let's just work with lens 1 for now, and I'm going to take some materials and just drop them. And sometimes when I'm working in materials, I like to go into performance mode, Alt-P, speeds things up a little bit. Let me make my screen a little bigger for you guys. There we go. Okay. So let's take a look at this material I have here. It's a plastic. This one thing I can do, I'm going to start with that. Put that over here on these grips. And actually this grip is going to be a metal, but we'll mess with that later. So instead of using the plastic here, what I might want to use instead is the translucent material. And that's going to just give it a softer look. So let's go ahead and enable translucent. I'm going to crank up the translucent transmission color. And then I'm going to bring the diffuse color up from black a little bit, because we don't want it to be too dark. And we can just maybe turn off the textures for now. Okay. Having a bit of a problem with my mouse. I think there's actually something on the sensor. I'll deal with it. Alright. So that texture I had on there was actually almost black. So that was making it dark because the texture was blending with the underlying color. So now that I have that texture removed, I can make the material overall darker. And now what I want to do with the translucent material is adjust the translucency slider. And as I increase that, you'll see it gets a softer look to it. So let's look at it from about this angle. So with the translucent material, though, you have to be careful because if you increase the translucency slider too much, it starts to have a negative impact on the look. Let's just get this. It's a subtle effect. And one area where we can really see its effect would be over here. You'll see, if I look through this thin surface, we're actually getting light scattering through that surface, as you can see there. And if I were to color the transmission, we'll get that color of scattering light. And as I increase the translucency, I get more of that coming through. So I'll just put that back over there, put a metal back here. And what I'm going to do is roughen this. So the roughness will make it look like a less shiny plastic. And I'll just let that res up for a second. And let's just turn the translucency back to white transmission there. Alright, that should give it a nice result. So now what I want to deal with is this inner part here. So maybe start, just double click here, and I'm just going to throw on a black plastic on the inner part here. Now one thing that I generally do with any material is I never use completely black, because in nature you don't get quite perfect black materials. So I say somewhere around 5 to 10, depending on the lighting. Alright, let's make this a glass, solid glass. Now, you might be curious. I'm sure you've seen the solid glass material and the glass material, and I'll go ahead and show you what the benefits of each are. Let's take a look at, for this actually, let's take a look at a new file. I think I have something here. Thick, there we go. Let's take a look. Okay, so I'm just going to center, snap. There we go. All right, so this file, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to just set this to a solid glass. I'm going to pause this other session, a keyshot, that's Shift-P. And, of course, the K button will bring up keyshot hotkeys. So all the hotkeys I use can be found there. All right, so I have my first model here. And what you're seeing here is just a simple revolve out of SolidWorks that actually has trimmed out thickness. So you have basically that thick of a wall coming all the way down the side. So it's basically a shell there. But now I have another file. Let's call this, let's get this one here. And I'm going to add the scene, center snap, that's fine. From previous is fine. Okay, so now I have this other one called no thick. And this basically, this has one surface to represent the complete shell of the model. So now what I'm going to do is put that same material on there. And right away we notice obviously a big difference here in terms of color and refraction. But this of course is using the same exact material. So what you're seeing here is the benefit of the solid glass material. What it does is it actually has accurate color density properties. So on this material, we talk about the same material, exactly the same color, IOR, everything. But on this one, since we have surfaces that are very thin and then there's a big open space in the middle, we don't get a lot of color coming through because the color is fairly faint. And the transparency setting, which is what controls basically the density of the color in the material, is at a kind of high value for that kind of model. This is a relative thing, so it's high for this, but might be low for something else. But you can see as I decrease the transparency of the material, it's effectively packing in a more dense amount of color into the surface. So for a given surface thickness, you get more color if you have a lower transparency. You can see as I increase that, I get a more white-looking glass. If we look at this on our thick, basically this is a solid volume of glass now. If I have to increase the transparency a lot more to get rid of that color density. And so you can see, but if I lower it a lot, I get a very dense color. I understand the sound quality isn't exactly very good. Isn't too good. Yeah. Let me try this. Does it get better now that both of my keyshot sessions are paused? I wonder if my computer's having a hard time. Oh. Well, that's not good. Let's try this. I wonder, is it better with performance mode on? This might help out a little bit. Let me know. Sounds okay? Okay, excellent. We'll go ahead and close SolidWorks. That might help also. Okay. So basically, to finish off, solid glass, its biggest advantage, the solid glass material, is that it does color density in a scientifically accurate way. Let's compare this glass to the glass material. I'm going to apply the glass material to both. In fact, I'm going to shift left click on this one, and then shift control right click onto here, and that's going to paint and link these two models together. Now, when I change the color, you'll see it change together. And right now, there's a couple of things in play. I have this glass not set to even refract. So of course that's going to be completely different than the solid glass material, which you can't turn off refraction. On the glass material, to turn off refraction, you have to disable two-sided. So that's what I've done here. Enabling it, you can see it creates the accurate refractions, and we get basically the same result as the solid glass material. In fact, I can just change over to solid glass here, especially if I make it white. This will look pretty much the same, but the glass material has the ability to turn that off. So this two-sided option is very nice when you have only one surface that needs to represent a vessel of any sort, or the windshield of a car. If you look at it one surface, it allows you to create the shine and reflection of glass without the refraction. And that's especially useful for things like bottles, where if you don't have the thickness actually modeled and you apply a solid glass material, it will look like it's a complete solid chunk of the refractive material that you apply to it. So that's one advantage towards glass, is that I can actually turn that off. It's not the most accurate thing to be able to actually not have any thickness. Of course, it's ideal to model the thickness, but if you don't have that, then at least you have something you can use to get a decent result. But let's take a look at two-sided on, so it's refracted just like the solid glass. And when I add color to this, you see that it actually has it doesn't have any idea how thick or thin these surfaces are. It has just a set amount of color for the surface. So even though this is much thinner surfaces than this, we get basically the same amount of color. And that might be something you want at times, but of course the most accurate result is to use the solid glass. And the reason it's really nice is because you get in areas, you see in this thin area of this model, it's very dynamic. We get a lot of color here, but we get much less color here, and that's the property of the density of the color in the glass. All right, so let's go ahead and back to the file here. Audio problems, yeah. Trying to, let's see if it continues with this one. Well, all right, so what we're doing is we're going to look at this glass. We're going to apply what we've just talked about to this. But let's take a look at what's inside there, because it's getting a bit crazy. All right, just going to apply the same metal to these other parts here. Okay, and down there is another glass, so I'm going to make that a lens sort of material. Just make that white. Sound quality is still bad. I wonder maybe if I make this smaller. I suppose I could, let's try calling in. Give me 1 second.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, web events made easy. Welcome to GoToWebinar, web events made easy.
What we're gonna try to do is use Ryan's laptop for the audio. Let's get some power plugged in. That's actually around back, Ryan. If you want to plug that in. All right. All right, let's see. Okay, let us know how that sounds, and we'll just continue on. It's a little further away, so I might have to speak up a little more now. That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. All right, excellent. So let's get back to it here. GoToMeeting stuff I have open. Okay. So what we're dealing with here is we have the lenses. So what I might actually do, I'm going to just deal with the lens itself. So I'm going to turn off the camera body. and we'll spin around to the back here and just make sure we get everything painted up. This surface here might make a little, just a dark sort of blackout type material. That should work nicely. Okay, so double click here, we have our solid glass just set to whites, and we're going to bring back the other glass there. Let's just get rid of these other things. Okay, and let's turn off these two. There we go. All right, so there's our glass. One thing to notice here is in performance mode, we are actually not seeing through the glass, and that's because we look at what performance mode is doing. You see performance mode here.